Hello, welcome to the Oxfordshire Business Kickstart Grants webinar, which is being recorded on the 18th of September 2020, which is the day that we are making the documentation leading up to the Kickstart Grants live. My name is James Rule. I'm a freelance consultant providing compliance management support to Oxfordshire. So that means that I support the European funded programs that Oxfordshire has to ensure they're delivered in line with the rules and the regulations. In this webinar, we're going to provide you with an overview of the Kickstart grants, set out what level of support is available to you. You have the eligibility criteria for it, the eligible activities that you can seek a grant for, how the grants will work, in particular looking at the quotes and submission of claims, the timescales for those, and reminding you that if you have any questions that are not answered in this webinar, or the guidance notes, or the online frequently asked questions document, you should email them in to business@oxfordshirelep.com. Okay. So first thing I'm very quickly going to cover is who and what is OXLEP. OXLEP is the Oxfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership, which is one of a network of, I think, 38 local enterprise partnerships around the country. And they're responsible for supporting businesses and skills within businesses within specific local areas. Within OXLEP, we have a section called OXLEP Business, which is responsible for running the Oxfordshire Growth Hub, which is the primary point of local business support activity for SMEs within the Oxfordshire area. So the Kickstart grants, which are the focus of this presentation, are a European Regional Development Fund grant programme. Every single local enterprise partnership area has been given a Kickstart grant allocation. The Oxfordshire allocation is £297,888 of funding that we can give out as grants. For standard grants, the minimum amount that you can request is £1,000 and the maximum is £3,000. There's also a type of grant that are referred to in the guidance notes as exceptional grants. Now those are grants that are between £3,000 and £5,000 in value, and they will be, as the name suggests, exceptional. We are expecting the number of these to be very, very, very small, and if you're seeking an exceptional grant, you must explain in the application why you believe your case to be exceptional, and there'll be more on that later in the presentation. The grant rate for whatever grant you apply for is 100%, so there is no match funding commitment required from you. You will receive back from OXLEP every single penny that you have asked for if your grant is approved. The grants fall into two categories. There's grants for visitor economy businesses, and I'll say a bit more in a moment about how you know if you're within the visitor economy, and wider economy grants. And the split between them is roughly a third of the funding to visitor economy and roughly 2/3 to the wider economy. Please be aware that any individual business or sole trader can apply for one or the other, but not both. If the same business applies for both grants, then both applications will be rejected. We have no way of telling which application you would prefer, and it is not fair on other applicants if one organisation gets effectively two bites at the cherry. So first of all, how do you know if you're eligible? These grants are aimed at SMEs, that's small, medium-sized enterprises. And that includes things like sole traders, because you have to have less than 250 employees. You can be not more than 25% owned by any organisation that itself is not an SME. We'll come back to that in a moment. And you need a turnover of less than 50 million euros and or a balance sheet of less than 43 million euros. As you work through the application form online for the Kickstart grants, there will be questions that you have to ask that cover all of these elements. The one that businesses frequently have problems with is the 25% ownership element. What this is seeking to do is to make sure that public money is not used to support businesses where there is a massive parent company, Microsoft being the example that I always pick on for some reason. If you are more than 25% owned by Microsoft, the regulations would consider that it is far better to allow Microsoft to support you than public money. Now, there are some exceptions to this. Specifically, that if you are 25% owned by a venture capital or other investment type organisation, and that organisation could quite easily have a balance sheet of more than 43 million euros, it doesn't count. Okay, so university spin-outs where university own them, or another investor, venture capital for example, will not count towards your 25% ownership. Before you apply for a Kickstart grant, if you're in any doubt, please explain your circumstances using the email address on the second slide, and we'll come back to you and tell you whether you're eligible or not. Please don't wait until the day that the online portal opens to worry about this, because it is complicated. You also cannot be supported if you are an undertaking in difficulty. Now, if you're an SME less than 3 years old, you don't count. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether or not you pass or fail the undertaking in difficulty test. If you're less than 3 years old, the regulations say that you do not count as an undertaking in difficulty. If you're more than 3 years old, then an undertaking in difficulty is an SME that is either subject to insolvency proceedings, which is fairly straightforward, easy to understand, or has received rescue or restructuring aid. Again, if you've received that, you will know about it. Or, and the first two bullet points in the sublist, more than half of your subscribed share capital for a limited liability company has disappeared as a result of accumulated losses. If you're an unlimited liability, it's more than half of your capital overall. So effectively, to make that clearer, we've set out a little table at the bottom of the slide that tries to show how this works in practice. So your original capital as a limited company was £10,000 share capital. You bring forward accumulated losses of 0. So you've always made a profit. You've got no accumulated losses. You pass. You're not an undertaking in difficulty. If, however, you carry forward 4,999 of accumulated losses, so let's say you're 4 years old and you've lost around about £1,225 each year, just under, then you would still pass because you've only got accumulated losses of 4,999 against share capital of 10,000. If, however, you carry forward losses of just over £1,225, so your accumulated losses over your 4 years of existence are £5,001, you will fail the test because those losses are more than 50% of your original capital. And then similarly, if your capital is 10,000, you have 15,000 of accumulated losses, you'll fail the test. This is a fairly simple test that used to be based on your last published accounts with Companies House. Given the COVID-19 situation, that requirement has been relaxed so that it is your position as a company as at the 31st of December 2019 that governs whether or not you're considered an undertaking in difficulty. So if you've submitted accounts in August, say, it doesn't matter what they say, it's your position at the 31st of December 2019 that counts. Really, it's a fairly simple calculation for anyone who signed up to our other European Regional Development Fund projects, ISFB and Escalate, it's been a fairly simple self-declaration that you're not an undertaking difficulty. And again, it's a tick box within the online portal. We are only obliged to formally check if an organisation is applying for more than £50,000 of aid. Clearly that doesn't apply for the Kickstart grants, but we are required to do random spot checks on all recipients of support. So we recommend that you speak to your accountant, and the little formula that I've written there is my way of showing the accountant what it is that you're looking for. Capital plus your accumulated profit and loss needs to be greater than your capital divided by 2. Your accountant should be able to advise on this. It sounds worse than it is. State aid. This Kickstart grant is a state aid. We're managing it under the de minimis exemption, which means that any SME, any undertaking, can receive up to €200,000 worth of aid over a 3 financial year rolling period. And as part of the application process within the portal, you will need to declare what other de minimis state aid you've received. And you will have been told what this is. So if, for example, you've been through any of the other Oxfordshire Growth Hub programs, which we operate as a de minimis aid, you will have received a letter from us that sets out the value of the aid you're given. You will either have a letter that says you're about to participate in this particular program. We anticipate that the value of aid you will receive will be, and then there's a number. Or you will have a letter that says, thank you, you have participated in this program. The value of aid that you actually received was. Okay. And just for completeness, if you're awarded a grant, this is nice and simple. The value of the de minimis aid that you receive is the value of the grant that we pay you. So from that point of view, this is fairly simple. So what can you use the grant for? All applicants, whether they're within the visitor economy or the wider economy, can use the grant for one-to-one specialist advice and support. So this is effectively consultants addressing immediate needs that have been brought on by COVID-19. So this could include support around human resources, it could include accountancy support or other financial support, legal support addressing issues resulting from COVID-19, health and safety advisors, IT, digital sector specialists. There's a huge range of things that can be covered. I suppose one thing that we cannot cover that I should highlight, if you were looking for accountancy support, we cannot cover the costs of your annual accounts that are then submitted to HMRC and Companies House, because that is a legal requirement and ERDF money cannot be used to cover a legal requirement. All applicants can also use the grant money to purchase minor equipment, to adapt or adopt new technologies in order to keep delivering or to change your business to diversify in response to COVID-19. The critical exception there is that we cannot cover equipment and supplies, consumables that are associated with PPE and social distancing. So if one of the things you want to use the grant to fund are the stickers on the floor of your business saying, you know, stand queue here, and then one or 2 meters away saying next person queue here, or a supply of masks to go in your office or business, that's something that we cannot fund with this grant. They are explicitly excluded by the funding body that's providing the money. In addition, businesses from the visitor economy can use the grant to support things that provide productivity improvements. So this would be digital tools, covering yield management software, mentoring, networking, that sort of thing, and the development of innovative delivery in a socially distanced economy. So what do they mean by that? They mean things like new ways to deliver cultural events and festivals. There isn't a particularly detailed set of guidance on what that means, because it's being left open to applicants to be innovative and to tell us what elements it is that you want to use the grant money to support. I said I would come back to eligibility in respect to the visitor economy. The simplest way to check this is to see whether your business SIC code, and this is the code that you've registered with Companies House when you set the business up, matches the list of SIC codes that have been identified by our funder, the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government. These appear as an annex to the end of the guidance notes, and the simple test is if your SIC code is in the list of codes accepted as part of the visitor economy, then you're in. It is possible that you consider yourself to be part of the visitor economy and your SIC code does not match the list of codes approved by MHCLG. There will then be a self-declaration question within the grant application document online, specifically saying, does your business predominantly serve the visitor economy? It'll be a yes/no question. There is a useful definition for what the government means by the visitor economy, which you can find using the web link set out here. It is quite useful, and it sets out what the government understands the visitor economy to be in the context of these grants. So I suggest, if you're in any doubt, have a look at those. In order to spend the grant, it almost goes without saying that you need to know how much grant you require. You should provide a written quote as part of the application process. There'll be space in the online form to upload one, and the costs stated in your application must then match the invoice provided with your grant claim. So the one thing that we cannot do is cover costs that form part of a larger invoice. And if your claim exceeds the grant that we've awarded, we cannot approve it. Although, to be fair, a lower claim than the approved grant can be paid. So if you submit an application that says, I'm going to have some consultancy support that costs £10,000, can I please have a grant towards £3,000 of that? The answer will be no. That application will not be approved. If you submit an application for £3,000 of support, and then you submit a claim for £3,200 of support, that claim will not be approved. We will not be able to pay that claim because it exceeds the £3,000 limit. If, however, we award a grant of £3,000 and then, for example, you negotiate a small reduction on your quote and put in a claim for £2,700, that's not a problem, as you can probably imagine. And we'll be able to approve the claim and pay that grant. Each approved grant can only make a single claim. We're expecting a high volume of grants from this process. We cannot cope with more than a single claim for each project, and we'll require those claims in within 2 months of the grant offer letter being issued, or by the 29th of January 2021, whichever date comes first. And I'm sure this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. The costs covered by the grant cannot be funded elsewhere. So it can't be funded through Oxlep's COVID-19 Business Resilience Grant that some applicants may have received. It can't be funded by a local authority grant scheme, either Oxfordshire or anywhere else. Effectively, you cannot have funding for the same activity twice. And we will check that. I'm sure one of the questions that has occurred to everyone is to work out exactly what constitutes an exceptional grant. The technical definition is it's between £3,000 and £5,000 of grant requested. I will reiterate the point that we are only allowed to provide a minimal number of exceptional grants. The definition has been left deliberately wide for us. Effectively, it is where an SME, a business, has been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. This could be a business where previously you could only deliver face-to-face, and you would arguably have suffered more than a business that could continue to work virtually. Again, there will be very, very few exceptional grants, if any. It is not a bad result if there are no exceptional grants, because it means the available grant pot will go further and be able to support a larger number of businesses. If you apply for an exceptional grant, you will have to explain within the application why you believe your grant request fits the category for an exceptional grant. Why have you been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19? And the assessors will review that and score it. If they do not accept that the grant is exceptional, then the application will be rejected and the assessors' decisions will be final. We would encourage you to not apply for exceptional grants. It is more difficult for us to award them. It will be more difficult for them to be received. And frankly, the more exceptional grants that we receive and approve, the fewer grants between 1 and 3,000 we can give out. It is much better in terms of the number of SMEs receiving a grant that applications are vastly predominantly within the range of £1,000 to £3,000. So how do the grants work? I've said that they are 100% of the costs that you incur. There is no requirement for any match funding from you as businesses. If you submit an application that does offer match funding, it will be rejected. We cannot fund that. And the grant claimed must match the invoice and the defrayal evidence that you provide with your grant claim. And it should match the original grant application. So as I said earlier, a lower spend will result in a lower grant payment. You cannot redeploy and underspend on other costs that you didn't put in your application. So if you've applied for £3,000 and you manage to negotiate a really good discount and only spend £2,000, it does not mean that you have £1,000 that you can spend on something similar or something else in the hope that we will then reimburse it. We won't be able to. Critical point to say there is that in order to claim the money back from us, you must have spent it. So it must have left a bank account in order to be counted as defrayed expenditure. It's acceptable to spend money using a credit card, but you cannot claim it from Oxlep until you can provide evidence that you've paid that credit card from a bank account to at least the value of the grant that you're claiming. So if you have £1,000 of grant that you're looking to claim, you've paid that £1,000 out to a supplier using a credit card, the evidence that we require will be the invoice for the £1,000, a copy of the credit card bill, redacted if necessary, showing that you've paid the £1,000 with the card, and a copy of your bank statement, again redacted as necessary, showing that at least £1,000 has left your bank and have gone to the credit card company. In terms of the application process, in line with other growth hubs and local enterprise partnerships, we're operating an online application portal. This portal will open at 10 AM on Thursday, the 1st of October, and it will close either when 250 applications have been submitted or at 5 PM on the 1st of October, whichever one we get to first. If we receive 250 applications by midday on the 1st, the scheme will close. If we receive 200 applications by 5 PM on the 1st, the scheme will close at 5 PM. It is worth noting that other growth hubs who've used an online portal have seen very high demand, but unlike Oxlep, some of the other growth hub portals have allowed businesses to start completing applications and saving draft applications several days, if not weeks, in advance of actually opening the portal to submissions. We're not going to do that. We will publish in the guidance notes the details that you'll need to provide and the questions that you will need to answer, but we are not going to have the portal available for partially saved applications and then have a situation that is slightly like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and it's effectively fastest finger first for whoever can click on the submit button quicker than everyone else. We are hoping that this approach will smooth the demand and the submission curve throughout the day. It's also worth noting that I've said that we will accept up to 250 grant applications before we close. To give you some sense for what we think we're going to be able to fund, we anticipate that we'll only be able to fund between 68 and 120 out of the applications. So there's a less than 50% chance of being successful, even on the best case scenario, and that does depend on the value of grants that businesses request. If every business requests the £3,000, the maximum standard grant, we're going to be able to fund just under 100 grants in total. If every business requests £2,000, the number of grants that we can fund will increase. And we're expecting that there will be a range of grant application values submitted. It's also worth saying that you should apply for what you need to deliver whatever it is you're looking to do with the grant. You're not going to get any kind of benefit or disbenefit by only submitting a request for £1,000 or only submitting a request for £3,000. It'll be based on the assessment criteria, which I'll come on to in a later slide. So when you log in, when the application portal goes live, there's a series of pages. Each page reflects a single section. Section 1 covers the key business information. Now this is fairly straightforward. What's your company name? What's your registered address? Your company's house registration number. That is important because the CRM system that we're using and the application system can link through to company's house and immediately validate company's house numbers and registered addresses. We need your date of incorporation, VAT number if you have it, your SIC code, which should match the one registered with company's house and is the code that we'll use that defines your business activity and helps us to judge whether or not you qualify as part of the visitor economy. A brief overview of the business, details about other funding you've applied for and the outcome of that, and your number of full-time employees. The second page looks for details on previous year's turnover, balance sheet, and supporting evidence for that. So please have those to hand on the 1st of October. And this is all about assessing your status as eligible businesses under the SME definition. There will be a de minimis declaration where you can set out any aid under the de minimis regulation that you've had in the past. An overview of the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on your business and details of your income over the past 14 months, so that what that does is help us to gain an insight into the financial impact that the pandemic has had. So there's an opportunity to give us a narrative on what COVID-19 did to your business, but that will be supported by some very clear numbers in the application. There's the opportunity to upload evidence, things like management accounts or a download from your finance software. If you're a new start, so a business that may not have year one accounts in place yet, so you might be 10, 11 months, maybe 12 months, just shy of a year old, please provide a forecast for your first year of trading in place of accounts. Section 3 is fairly straightforward. How much are you looking for and what do you want to use it for? So you've got really the three options there. And then outline any jobs that you may create, or far more likely in the context of these grants, safeguard, and any products that you might launch that are new to the market or new to the firm that you may enable. We are not expecting you to achieve new products to the firm or market in the 2 months that you have to spend and claim your Kickstart grant. But it's a useful indication to us that we can then follow up in future when we're measuring the impact that these grants have had on Oxfordshire businesses. Section 4 gives you the opportunity to outline why you need the grant and how it will help you. You should write this section particularly in reference to the impact of COVID-19. This is, after all, what the grants are seeking to help address. Provide us with the start and end date of your grant project activities and the details of any quotes you've had. As I've said earlier, we're not requiring 3 quotes for the level of funding that's available, but we very strongly advise you to do research in advance of applying, because we cannot retrospectively increase the award that we've given. If you apply on the guesstimate that your work will cost £2,000 and you go out and get an actual quote, the cheapest of which is £2,500, if you've applied for £2,000, then there's a problem. We recommend that you get at least 1 quote, and preferably the quote you plan to use at the point of application. Grant funding requested. This is an amount, and I've said earlier that we cannot part fund a project. So if your total cost is 3.5 and you're asking for 3,000 towards it, we cannot approve that application. It's not acceptable. If you have a wider set of activities that are going to cost you £3,000 and you want a grant that contributes, the only way it is possible to do that is to carve out a specific element and treat it as a standalone project. I want a specific part of my HR support and I'm going to seek a specific quote for that. And that comes to £3,000. There's an invoice for £3,000, a defrayal of £3,000. So the audit trail follows through at the £3,000. We cannot fund it if you're saying, I have a wider HR project that costs £10,000. Can I have part of it, please? No. The last part of the application portal is a summary of the funding request, so it will pull through some of the details from earlier in the form. There's the equalities data element that goes in, we need for monitoring and reporting purposes. There's a consent sharing and data processing agreement that enables us to actually use and deal with your grant applications. And then there's the declaration of yes, you confirm that these are accurate details and you confirm your submission. It is the point at which you press the submit button and that application goes into the system that it gets counted on our tracker of how many applications we've received. We've done everything we can to keep the application portal short and simple, and we recommend that you keep your responses short and simple as well to make it easier for the assessors. But I would caveat that by saying that you must provide enough information in your answers to allow us to understand and score your application. There is space to provide answers, please use it. If we don't have enough evidence, don't have enough information to judge, for example, the impact that COVID has had on your business, just writing a line or two about it was terrible, we lost our customers, is not going to be enough. We need to understand what that meant to you. Your customers dropped from X number in January, February down to Y number, or you had to completely stop your activity. Explain it to us so that we can understand what the impact has been. A critical thing to note is that we cannot guarantee the application portal will work or work as effectively on mobile devices, so things like iPhones or other mobile phones. We recommend that you make sure you have access to a laptop or a desktop computer at 10 AM on the 1st of October, when the portal will go live. And the last thing to say is, please remember it's a competitive process. We are going to have about 250 applications. Our best case forecast scenario is that we can support just under half of them. So it is entirely possible that you submit an application, there's nothing wrong with it, but another application just happens to score more highly. They've been impacted worse by COVID-19. It is unfortunately a competitive process. We do not have enough funding to be able to support everyone that we think will apply for this grant or would want to apply for this grant. So what are the assessment criteria? They're set out in the guidance notes, and I've just reproduced them here. We look at the quality of the application. Is it clear? Is the business clear? Is what you want to do with the grant clear? Do we understand what you want to spend the grant on? We look at the COVID impact. What impact has COVID-19 had on the business? What impact then will the grant have to help mitigate and manage that COVID impact? How will the grant help you to become sustainable? How will it safeguard your business moving forward? And then what sort of impacts are we likely to achieve? So are you going to safeguard any jobs? Will you even potentially create new jobs 6-9 months down the line? And then there's, of course, the question about exceptional grants. So for anyone applying for an exceptional grant, a fairly simple question: do the assessors believe that the application represents an exceptional case? So that's a quick run through the Kickstart grant programme. For more information, you are welcome, if you can bear it, to watch this webinar recording again. You can also watch the generic grants overview presentation that's also on the website. This covers our Innovation Support for Business Go Create grant scheme and the Escalate grant scheme. But in the second half of the presentation, it also has some hints and tips on how not to write grant applications, and therefore, by definition, the sort of things that will help grant applications to be successful. These slides, the guidance notes and a set of frequently asked questions will be published on the Oxlep website, which is oxfordshirelep.com/business, which is where you will have found and accessed this presentation. Please note that the frequently asked questions document will be updated regularly. Questions that we receive, if they're not covered elsewhere, will be added to the FAQs. So when you submit questions to the business@oxfordshirelep.com email address, please ensure they do not contain any commercially confidential information. And if you can keep them generic, please do. It's easier for us to publish the FAQs if we don't have to spend too much time rewriting questions so that they're widely applicable. And that's everything. I would recommend that you read all of the documents that are out there and start thinking about your responses well in advance of 10 AM on the 1st of October, when the online portal goes live. The portal, I suppose it's fairly critical to say, will be accessible on the oxfordshirelep.com business funding and grants pages of the website. And good luck with your applications. And thank you for listening.